For the last 6-7 months, the main topic for many political discussions has been Ukraine and various Ukraine-related issues. Today, I'm speaking with a person who has been actively commenting both on mass media and social network, especially Twitter, the war in Ukraine, not only military aspects of the conflict, but also geopolitical and socio-economic dimensions. Today, my guest is General Ben Hodges, former Commanding General, U.S. Army Europe from 2014 to 2017. He's now Senior Advisor at Human Rights First, and until recently was a Pershing Chair in Strategic Studies at the Center for European Policy Analysis. General Hodges, glad to see you today, and thank you very much for finding time for this very interview.
Thank you for the privilege.
You are a professional military man. I am not, so I'll try to keep the military topics during the interview as lightweight as possible. Two major topics of the recent weeks are the partial mobilization in Russia and possible nuclear strike. We'll talk about the latter a bit later, but I would love to learn your take on the effect of the mobilization. Will it be able to change the situation in favor of Russia on the battleground?
So the partial mobilization is a catastrophe for the Kremlin. It's clear the way it was announced and sort of rolled out in such a clumsy, incoherent way tells you that this was not a well thought out policy, that it was more of a compromise, probably inside the Kremlin to satisfy some of the hardcore ultranationalists who were demanding more, but with President Putin trying not to reveal to his own population what a mess it was in Ukraine, and that they were having to, that this so-called special military operation was in serious trouble. So the way it was announced was an indicator. The fact that they needed it also is an indicator. And the fact that 500,000 people departed Russia to get out of, to avoid it, 500,000, 500,000 military-age males headed towards the Caucasus or Kazakhstan or to the Baltics or to an airport to avoid it, tells you that there is no stomach for this war in Russia amongst the population. And of course, the unlucky ones who were mobilized, you can see from all the different videos and anecdotes that the logistics infrastructure is not in place to properly equip them, house them, and train them. And so what we're going to see is probably thousands of untrained men sent to the slaughter.
Yeah. General Hodges, you've probably been asked these a million times already. Let me also ask, how real is Putin's use of nuclear weapons, and can this move be a game changer, not only on the battlefield, but in the West-Russia confrontation general? And the reason why I'm asking you this particular question is because some Russian experts, Dmitry Trenin, for instance, argue that the root of the problem is that the Western society, including the American, is not afraid enough of a nuclear war anymore. No one is taking this threat, the threat of a nuclear war, seriously, and this is why many powers already ignore Russia and its red lines. What has usually kept Russia as a superpower was its nuclear arsenal, but with no one being afraid of the possibility of nuclear warfare, Russia then might lose its nuclear or in general superpower status. Well, do you think Russia could use the war in Ukraine simply as a justification to launch a nuclear strike, just to force others to take it seriously, and or to revive the fear of a nuclear war as a means to preserve its superpower status?
So I don't know anybody that doesn't take it serious. Everybody I know, everybody I talk to, everybody I listen to takes it serious. That doesn't mean they think it's likely, but we all take it serious. I mean, we're talking about thousands of warheads, whether they're ballistic, strategic weapons or tactical nuclear weapons. So we all take it serious. But I believe that the Kremlin realizes now that they get no advantage to use a nuclear weapon. I mean, it won't do anything. Those weapons are most effective for them if they actually don't use them. Because if they do use a nuclear weapon, it will be impossible for the United States not to respond. And because Iran is watching, North Korea is watching, China is watching, and if we give in to a nuclear blackmail by the Kremlin, then we will be dealing with this problem over and over and over. So this is why my president has, I think, done a very good job of communicating that, yes, this is serious. He even used the word Armageddon last night, comparing, what the outcome would be. So he clearly takes it serious. But I think that was not because he's scared, but it was to, or that we are scared, but it was to convey to the Kremlin, this is very serious. And so I know for a fact that not only have we conveyed this publicly, but that there are lots of back channel discussions going on that are conveying to different people in the Kremlin what a disastrous mistake it would be for Russia. And the people around Putin who keep him in power, they know that if Putin, if they don't stop him, then they can forget any hope they ever had for anything looking like a return to normalcy in the post-Putin, post-conflict era. Nothing. They're not going to be allowed to go back to their big apartment in Belgravia in London. They're not going to be able to dock their yacht down somewhere in Greece. None of that. Over.
Well, interestingly enough, a Russia expert I happened to speak a fortnight ago also told me nuclear weapons are effective as long as they are used as a means of threat, not as an actual
right.
Weapon.
That's same thing, right?
Yeah. Many experts overestimated Russia's military capabilities before the war. Politicians and experts, pundits in many capital cities simply expected Kyiv to fall in a couple of days. What do you think is the reason of the failure? There are experts who argue that the Russian military suffers from the same ills as the Soviet military. Do you think it's true, or maybe modern Russian military is actually far weaker than the Soviet one? I remember a few days back you also mentioned deep corruption in Russian military structures as one of the reasons of this whole mess.
Yeah. So I personally overestimated their capability. I was wrong. I never believed that they would get Kyiv in a few days. I had just been in Kyiv early in February, and that's a huge city, very complex, and with the size of the Russian force, there was no way they could not have captured Kyiv in 4 days, even if there were no Ukrainian soldiers. I mean, it's just not. You can look at it and say that's not going to happen. So, but nonetheless, I did overestimate their ability. I failed to appreciate the depth of the corruption, and the depth of the corruption is manifested in false reporting about people, about readiness, about quality, the things that should be happening in any professional military, where people are making sure that what's provided by industry meets specifications. There are so many places where you can make money in this process, and this was going on at deep levels throughout the place. And another manifestation of it, of course, is the theft. I mean, soldiers steal from their own unit to sell fuel, to sell tools, to sell equipment for money or for alcohol or for whatever. I mean, it's endemic in the institution of the Russian military. They were not ready because of corruption, but also they were not ready. And this was the second thing that I failed to appreciate. They did not have operational experience. I mean, I thought, well, they were in Georgia, they were in Crimea, they were in Syria, they were in Africa, they were, Donbass, all that. Actually, it was a very small percentage of the military had any actual operational experience. And if you don't have operational experience, then you do stupid things like we saw in terms of the logistics, that 40-mile convoy. the terrible employment of tanks with no infantry, all bunched together. These are all examples of a unit that is terrified, that has no experience, and they don't know how to do what they're doing. The Navy, the Great Black Sea Fleet, it's hiding today, and Ukraine does not even have a Navy. So this is, these are all indicators that they did not have operational experience where you would learn how to integrate air, land, sea. You would understand what's required for logistics. You would know how to have combined arms with tanks and infantry moving together, probably like they used to do back in the Cold War days, but they sure don't have it now. I miss that.
Well, as I said at the beginning of our conversation, I'm no military expert and would love to avoid those topics which I may not understand fully. But a colleague of mine from our think tank insisted I ask this very question, and which hopefully this will be of great interest to many more people. And you also mentioned it a couple of minutes ago. Why is Russia so bad in operational art?
Well, part of this is because they have the corruption inside the government. Their, I think, inability to explain to their public what they're doing. So they resort to mercenaries, contract soldiers, not contract soldiers, but Wagner Group, to do things. So it doesn't get the normal kind of public interest or understanding. There is no oversight from the Duma, not really the way a parliament should provide oversight. It's a reflection of a corrupt government that's a dictatorship who does pretty much what he wants, along with a small group. And they probably thought, because of the gross overestimation of their own abilities and their total disregard for Ukrainian capabilities, that they just would be able to do a big convoy. It would be like Budapest or Prague back during the Cold War, just roll into the city. So, so the reliance on a very, very small percentage of soldiers, the VDV, airborne, Spetsnaz, and Wagner, to do the vast majority of the fighting. If you don't have operational experience, and if you don't do exercises that are really true exercises where you train to the point of failure, then you never discover or you don't expose any weaknesses. And again, this goes to corruption. So it was incredible to me and many other Americans that watched this. How did they not seize or achieve air superiority on the first day? I mean, that's basic stuff. You decapitate your opponent's communications. They didn't do that. We all saw President Zelensky walking around on a cell phone on day 3, and they were not able to achieve air superiority despite their huge numbers.
That's strange, yeah. Well, if we assume Russia's ultimate defeat and humiliation, what's next for the country? General, in mid-September, you warned in an article of yours the West, or the international community in general, to be prepared for the disintegration of Russia. We know how the West grossly mismanaged 2 previous Russian collapses back in 1917 or 1991. So how to prepare? Are there any realistic plans in Washington, London, Brussels, or Paris for such a likely or unlikely scenario?
Well, of course, I'm not sure what all specific preparations would have to be done. What I was trying to do was reflect my concern over the possibility. The kind of things that we think about automatically, of course, are nuclear weapons. Where are they? I'm very certain that we know where the strategic weapons are all located. I'm less certain that we know where all of the tactical nuclear weapons are located. And of course, Iran, I'm sure, would love to get their hands on some of those weapons, as would other people. And so the relevant agencies, both national agencies, international agencies, I imagine will work together to think through what would be required. Now, look, I'm not advocating for this disintegration, by the way. I'm just I want to
Kind of predicting it.
yeah, I'm thinking through what would be the implications. And there, of course, there will always be a Russian state. You know, the Federation is an artificial construct, but the Russian state is the Russian state, and they will have an interest in retaining control over those nuclear weapons. And perhaps they've already got it figured out. I don't know, but that's just the kind of thing that I was thinking of. The second thing, of course, there will be trillions of dollars of financial resources that are tucked away in all kinds of places that should belong to the Russian people. Instead, you'll see people with suitcases full of cash heading to wherever. So how do we in the different financial institutions shine bright lights on where all this money is located to make sure that the rich criminals that are responsible for the terrible condition of Russia today do not get out of there even richer. So that's something that I think the various agencies that track these kinds of things are probably would be thinking about. And then the third thing that comes to mind is the energy infrastructure. Now, this is the last winter. I believe this is the last winter that we will.
You are now quoting Mr. Kasparov, aren't you?
Exactly. I had he said that in a interview with Die Welt, and I had lunch with him last week in New York, and he really got my attention with that this is the last winter. You know, Russia will not be able to use its energy against Europe anymore. They played the gas card too early. Germans, I live here in Frankfurt, they have already made adjustments. Yes, it'll be painful. Yes, it'll be expensive. It's the last winter. And so, but what does happen to the infrastructure? Because China, India, others will still need that gas and oil. Russia will still need to have an economy of some sort. How does that work? And the final thing is the centrifugal forces will pull apart potentially the Federation. Chechnya, they've got their own army. Mr. Kadyrov has already said that no Chechens will be mobilized. I think the people of Dagestan are a little tired of providing all the casualties for the Russian military. Others of the various parts of the Federation may see this as finally their opportunity to break away. So you could imagine that this will not be easy or free of violence. We'll all have an interest in reducing that and the refugee flow that would come from it.
Thank you, sir. Why don't we continue our forecasting speculations a bit. This will be my last question, I promise. So how do you see the post-war world order? So how will the world change after this world? Will the new rules of the game will be rewritten, or should we expect the continuation of the post-1991 order? Nowadays, there are a lot of speculations and prognosis about the emerging new world order. What is your take on that?
Well, of course, what we're doing now supporting Ukraine is about so much more than just Ukraine. This is about a young democracy. It's an old country, but it's a young democracy under existential threat from a autocratic dictator that wants to destroy it and even the idea of a Ukrainian state. So this is part of what this is about. It's also about China, though. The Chinese are watching, and if the United States and UK and Germany and France and all of our European allies and partners together cannot bear the financial challenges of supporting Ukraine and help Ukraine defeat Russia and reestablish territorial sovereignty of its own country, if we can't do that, then I think the Chinese will not be real impressed with anything that we say about Taiwan or the South China Sea or other, the importance of respect for international borders, international waters, all of that. And so this is about a much larger strategic scale than just Ukraine. President Xi told his military to be ready for Taiwan by 2027. All right, that would be the last year of his third term, which I assume he starts here in a couple of weeks. So that's 5 years from now. That's not long, and so it's very important that we are able to help Ukraine defeat Russia, and that Europe continues on the track that it's on now, which is to improve its own defense, its own security, so that the United States, with our allies in the Indo-Pacific region and some European allies, can be prepared to deter China from making terrible mistakes. So that's part of what's going on. The United States needs the European Union as our most important economic partner. I think that the EU is obviously under a lot of pressure as well, but I've been impressed with what I have seen lately, and I think that they will be going through some critical self-analysis. The United States, democracy in our country is under massive pressure. That's why I joined Human Rights First, in fact, is because not only did I want to continue worrying about working on security and stability in Europe, I wanted to work on protecting democracy at home as well. Because if the United States cannot be a good example for everybody that, yes, democracy is not a ballet, but it's vital to unleash the talent of young people, then we've got to keep working at it.
General, I'm very much grateful to you for sharing your valuable thoughts with me. Thank you so much.
I'm grateful for the opportunity you gave me.